get to a place where Indigenous peoples in Canada are in control of their own destiny, making their own decisions about their future.
CBC has learned the Liberal government is delaying a key promise to Indigenous groups. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau pledged in February, as we just heard, to create a framework to recognize and implement Indigenous rights. But the CBC's Jorge Barrera found out the government will not table that legislation before the next election. And he joins us now with more on the story. Hey, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
What happened from that, between the time of that speech and the decision now?
Well, after that speech, Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett embarked on a cross-country engagement tour. She met with about 100 different groups and engagement sessions that included Indigenous First Nations leaders, Indigenous leaders, legal experts. And at the end of that, the government produced a discussion paper in September, right before the Assembly of First Nations was going to meet to discuss this very subject. And that discussion paper basically upset a lot of people because they said nothing that we said is reflected in this. We see that they criticized the positions taken because they said that the minister still had a role to play in defining who nations were. Now, this whole framework was supposed to be designed, or the promise was to create a path, a quicker path outside from under the Indian Act, the 1876 Indian Act, where right now you need to go through a long drawn-out processes like through the comprehensive claims. Like comprehensive claims are modern treaties, but those take years and they cost a lot of money. So this framework was supposed to basically enshrine Section 35 rights that are in the Constitution, Aboriginal rights, into federal law. And that was supposed to be a mechanism that allowed First Nations to easily reconstitute their governance structures.
So then what does it mean for I mean, it's hard to say across the board, but for Indigenous groups?
Well, you know, there was a lot of resistance to this framework from certain First Nations groups in a lot of regions of the country. And they were worried that, you know, the government was pushing ahead on something that they weren't really happy with and they were still suspicious of. And it was primarily because of that discussion paper, because there was really nothing beyond that to show anybody what this actually meant. So from the Assembly of First Nations point of view, I spoke with National Chief Pierre Bellegarde today. You know, he said, this is what we wanted. We wanted a delay and a recalibration of this for this to become a First Nations-led process. And, you know, that's what we wanted. We wanted this delay. But we also want to focus on other things. We want to focus on Romeo Saganash's bill to have the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People recognized by federal law. They want to see the federal government move ahead with the Indigenous Languages Act, which, according to Heritage Canada, that's still on pace to be tabled in the fall. I mean, the issue was getting it into this window before the next election. They needed to table stuff in the fall before Christmas so it could go through the parliamentary process, right, through the House, through committees, and then through the Senate, through committees, and then passing, and then the Royal Assent. They didn't think they could get that done if they tabled it in the new year. So this was the window, and there's nothing on paper yet.
Does the stalling of this legislation or the delay in even introducing it impede the greater goal that the government states and talks about all the time around reconciliation?
Both sides say that there are other things they can work on. They can actually work on policies that deal with comprehensive claims, that deal with additions to reserves. Because right now, for example, in Attawapiskat and Admiratung in Northern Ontario, these communities are bursting at the seams. They need more land to build more houses. That's expensive. So Attawapiskat in particular needs additions to reserves to be able to expand their reserve, which is very small. So, but it takes a lot. There's a lot of red tape involved with that. You got the province involved. So a lot of leadership wants a quicker way to actually expand communities because, you know, primarily, I mean, this comes to like daily life, and daily life is difficult when you can't build houses and you have overcrowded housing. Even if you have clean water, if you have 14 people living in a house, things don't really improve. So there are things that can be carved out of this, and like I said, the Languages Act is a big deal, and it looks like that's on track.
Yeah, we'll be watching for that one. Thanks a lot, Jorge.
Thank you.